here to watch on this Thursday evening. I can't tell you how much we appreciate it. Tattered Cover really is a community space, and the fact that we aren't able to physically be in the same community space, I appreciate you guys being able to continue to help us create this virtual community space. So thank you for doing that. My name is McKaylee. I work at Tattered Cover Bookstore, and we have two wonderful authors here this evening that I'm personally very excited for, and I can't wait to listen to them both speak. Just a couple of updates about Tattered Cover. Right now, all of our stores are open. All 4 locations are open at various days. You can go online and check out what days. Right now, our Colfax and Aspen Grove locations are open every single day from 10 to 7. And as always, if you want to shop in your pajamas and you're not quite ready to leave your house with your mask on yet, that's okay. You can always shop online at tatteredcover.com. That's open 24/7 for you. We're still doing curbside pickup as well as shipping, so you guys can select those options as well. And I just want to let anybody know that closed captioning is enabled for those of you that might need it. So what you do is on the screen that you're watching me on right now, you just want to click the little button at the bottom that says CC on it, and that'll enable closed captioning for you. Now I want to introduce the two authors that we have here. We first have Dani Shapiro. Dani Shapiro is the author of the instant New York Times bestselling memoir Inheritance, which was published in January 2019 by Knopf. Her other books include memoirs Hourglass, Still Writing, Devotion, and Slow Motion, and 5 novels including Black and White and Family History. Along with teaching writing workshops around the world, Dani has taught at Columbia and New York University, and is the co-founder of the Siren Land Writers Conference in Positano, Italy. In February of 2019, Dani launched an original podcast, Family Secrets, in collaboration with iHeartMedia. It's so good. You guys need to listen to it. Anyway, an iTunes Top 10 podcast, the series features stories from guests who, like Dani, have uncovered life-altering and long-hidden secrets from their family's past. She lives with her family in Litchfield County, Connecticut. And then the author of the hour, who we are celebrating the new release of her book, I have much trouble pronouncing it, I apologize, Beneficence. Dani's going to pronounce it better for me, and I apologize. Beneficence. Meredith Hall, her memoir Without a Map was instantly recognized as a classic of the genre and became a New York Times bestseller. It was named the best book of the year by Kirkus and BookSense and was an Elle Magazine Reader Pick of the Year. Hall was the recipient of the 2004 Gift of Freedom Award from A Room of Her Own Foundation. Her work has appeared in 5 Points, the Gettysburg Review and Kenyon Review, and the Southern Review, New York Times, and many other publications. Hall divides her time between Maine and California, and she's joining us now from Maine. It is my honor to welcome both Dani and Meredith, and we're going to have them join me now. Hello.
Hello.
Hi.
It's so good to see you both. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Great to be here. I wish we were actually in person at Tattered Cover, but
I agree.
This is pretty great too.
Well, I would love it if the two of you could just talk about Meredith's wonderful new book, start us off in this conversation. I know that Dani is going to be leading us in this in conversation piece, and we'll do a Q&A later. I'm going to pop out of the screen and let you two ladies talk for a little bit, and then I'll come back on to facilitate Q&A.
Great. Thanks, McKaylee.
Thank you both.
So, Meredith, I am so incredibly delighted to meet you virtually. I've loved your work from the moment that I read Without a Map, and have taught it and have thought about it. I've taught it many times. And then when your editor, Joshua, sent me an early galley of Beneficence, I was so excited. And I began reading it, and it was during these times. I mean, it was during a time where I think it hasn't been easy for a lot of us to focus and find the inner space to really enter, enter the world of the empathic imagination, and to leave reality and all of its oppression right now.
Yes.
And Beneficence drew me in such a powerful way. And, it's this kind of trope, or this, something that's said very often on book jackets or in blurbs, that, you'll be haunted by these characters long after you turn the last page. But it's really true in the case of Beneficence. I have not stopped thinking of the Center family since I read it. And then when I was rereading it today, thinking about speaking with you, I got all choked up all over again, reconnecting with those characters. So the way we're going to begin tonight, and thank you for everyone who's joining us. I'm hoping that you can read for a bit from this beautiful novel, and then we'll have a conversation, and then we'll open it up to questions.
Okay, thank you very much, Dani. I really appreciate the very, very kind things that you have said about my book. I appreciate it very much. I'll see if maybe I can bring these characters into some life here a little bit by reading. So Beneficence is told in three voices. This is a family, the Center family. Doris is the mother and wife. Tup is the father and husband, of course. And they have three children, Sunny, Dodie, and Beston. The three voices in this book are Doris and Tup, the mother and father, and their daughter, Dodie. The sons, Sunny and Beston, actually don't have voice here. Dodie in many ways speaks for her siblings, so she has a lot to say in this book. And these voices run in cycles. So we hear Doris, Dodie, Tup in that cycle again and again. So I'm going to start by reading in Doris's voice, the mother. This is fairly early in the book. The school play was coming up, and Dodie and Beston had parts. Sunny was growing up and wouldn't participate, which I was sorry about, his unwillingness to pretend for 1 hour that he was someone or something other than 13-year-old Sunny Center. But Best and Dodie were still just children and believed in that kind of play. And so that Saturday was a day of excitement around the house. Dodie let the chickens out of the coop and fed them without any reminders, and swept the dooryard and shed, running from task to task. Beston filled the crock in the outhouse with lime, lugging the heavy bag between his legs, and ran to me to ask what he was supposed to do next. They were both going to be poor villagers in a play the students wrote called Tomorrow, and I told them we would choose their costumes and wash their hair after noon dinner. We dug around in the closet in the upstairs hall. It's a place that gathers boxes of outgrown clothes and wool coats that are too frayed to be worn. Tup says I shouldn't collect things we don't use. I tell him that we can't be certain that we will always have the shoes and clothes we need, and at least we will be warm no matter what comes. He snorts and tells me that his wife and children will never need to wear rags. But today those rags were handy. The children were very pleased with themselves. They ran out together to show Sunny their get-ups and then refused to take them off until I called them in for hair washing. I cleared the counter by the kitchen sink and laid down a big towel. Who goes first? I asked, and Dodie said she would. They pulled off their jerseys and my daughter climbed from a chair and lay down, her soft dark hair trailing in the sink and her skinny legs stretched out along the counter. I told her to close her eyes and ran the water until it was warm. As I lathered her hair, I watched her beautiful little face, somehow so like mine and Tup's all at the same time, her hands clasped on her chest, so familiar. How can I love such a simple chore, one among hundreds in a week? I rinsed the soap down the drain and wrapped her head in a towel, and she let me hold her to me while I rubbed the water out of her hair. I combed it out and lifted her down, and we were done. And then I lifted Best up, and he laid his little boy's body out on the counter so earnestly, another job to be done in his day. And I offered him a washcloth for his eyes because he is frightened of the soap, but he said no because I knew Dodie had not used one. And he closed his eyes tightly and let me scoop the warm water over his short, dark hair. Here was a face I knew less fully, my youngest and most mysterious child. Beston asks so little of me, of Tup and his brother and sister. He watches and smiles and knows how to be by himself, while Dodie chatters to me and Sonny makes his way to his father's side to work. Best is always on the edge of things, it seems. I often have the urge to gather him up and tell him that he is as important as his noisier, older as the noisier older children, that Tup and I love him and admire him just as much. But he doesn't seem to need to hear that, and the days go on with all of that just a thought. This child's face is open, guileless, and I was flooded with a feeling that I had unwittingly withheld something from him that a mother owes her children. You're a very good boy, Best, I said. Yes, he said, his eyes still closed, his arms relaxed at his side, trusting me. I don't remember the play now, only those minutes in the old closet and Dodie and Best prancing around in their costumes and their little bodies stretched out on the counter for their hair washing. I remember pulling Best to me as I had Dodie, his willing lean into me as I rubbed his hair dry. So that is in Doris's voice. Would you like me to read a little of something in Dodie's voice, or shall I wait a little bit on that?
No, I think I would love for you to read a little bit in Dodie's voice, because I think one of the great strengths of this novel is the way that the voices are so differentiated from each other. I mean, they're just, and there's never, it's always such a high wire act when a novel is told in multiple points of view, because the reader tends to fall for one character more than another. And in the case of Beneficence, we're always just so happy about, there's such a rightness in where we go next. So yeah, if you would read a little bit of Dodie, that would be great.
Okay, this is Dodie. She is about 10 years old when she's telling us this story. Dodie is a great storyteller. She is, she's a child who questions her world, and she especially questions her family as they face some significant challenges and difficulties. She's the child that is constantly pressing at the family and asking them what their obligations to love are and calling them to those obligations. But at this point, she's 10 years old and she's an innocent child. And this is a story that she is telling us. Every spring, Daddy brings us all the way down to the mouth of our creek, where it opens to the sea at Carry Cove. We go down at night when the moon is full, but it's very cloudy, so everything looks like it's glowing from inside. Trees and fences and even barns, silver and lit up by a light you can't see. This is the time to dip for smelt, which we love to get and we love to eat. Daddy doesn't tell us ahead of time, and then he's by our beds in the middle of the night whispering, "Want to get some smelt?" And we know we have about 5 minutes to wake up enough to get into our chore clothes and our boots and our hats and mittens, because it's very cold on smelt night, and climb into the warm truck. This year, it was the end of March when Daddy believed the time was right. He put the radio up high in the truck and sang "Till the End of Time," as if he was the happiest man in the world. He reached over and squeezed the funny spot above Sonny's knee so hard it made Sonny laugh out loud. And then Daddy told him, wake up, we have smelt waiting for us." And he held Sonny's hand. Sonny's grown big for that, but still, whenever Daddy is in the truck with one of us, even Sonny, he holds our hand. We drove on the dark roads all the way to Chase Mills and turned down a tote road Daddy's grandfather showed him a long time ago, and we parked the truck. The wide cove spread silent beyond us. We carried the buckets and dip nets on the path through the black woods, and then we could hear our creek all the way down there near the ocean, roaring down the hillside and running out to the bay, while all the smelt tried to run upstream 5 miles to lay their eggs. Daddy said we were there to put them in our buckets and give them a lift. By now we were awake and cold before we even got into the water. Daddy put the big metal buckets on the rocks along the stream and told Sonny to take the net and move into the tumbling current. Daddy clicked on the flashlight, and there they were, pushing desperately upstream. He chose the night just right. So many little silver fish packed side to side, they made their own river of light in the stream. Sonny braced himself against the hard run of water and swept the net into the current, and it was full in a flash. Daddy held the bucket out over the creek to receive the shimmering fish. And again, and again. And then Sonny and my father had filled the first bucket, and it was my turn, always in order with everything. Sonny, Dodie, Beston. And I waded out to just below the tops of my boots. I could feel the fish slither and thump against my shins, wanting so much to go home to make their babies. It's not something you have to think about, Dodie, my father always says. Everything is part of the good world, a perfect system, and us eating those fish is part of that order. You can't be making every little fish something you need to save. My father is right. It felt like the most natural thing in the world to be standing in the icy water with fish bumping against me, trying to get past, and me reaching in among them and hauling them up, the water dripping in the silver light, the fish slapping silver, the trees glowing silver, my father and my brother's dark shadows with silver in their hair, their hands silver reaching to help me, the fish sliding into my bucket so I could place the net again. Beston's turn, then Daddy's, and then we each carried our bucket along the rocky path up to the truck. Daddy helping Beston, but letting him feel that he was doing it himself. And we didn't speak along that path or at the truck or on the long ride home. Daddy had the radio low now and the heater high, and we settled in close to each other for warmth and because we were happy and sleepy and satisfied. Daddy held Beston's hand, letting go to shift, and drove slowly so we could watch the woods and the farms in all their dark quiet and peace. Mom was up when we got home, nodding and smiling as we lugged our buckets to the sink. No one talked. We washed our hands in warm water and threw our clothes in the basket in the shed. And Sonny and Beston went to their room, and I went to mine, climbing back into our cold beds that were soon warm. No one would wake us for school in the morning. The sun was up and the kitchen was warm, and the fish were slit and gutted and in the chest freezer when we came down. Why don't the fish come to our farm? I asked my father once. Why do we have to go so far to find them? He said, everything we will ever need or want is close enough, Dodie. Are you telling me you don't like my singing in the truck? On cloudy full moon nights, I will remember all my life that soft silver light and the four of us standing in our creek, so far from home, but Center Creek still, no matter what, the fish rushing into our net and my welcoming mother waiting for us at home.
Thank you. That was beautiful. And the word that kept on just emerging, especially from that second reading in Dodie's voice, is the word hour.
Yes.
Hour. Yeah. You created, woven such a sense of this solidity of this blessed family.
Yes.
And I'm not going to give anything away because everyone listening needs to read this book. But it's so much about, like, at one point Tup says we are blessed people.
Yes.
And at another point, not that far away from that point, Doris says you can't know what will come. And that's really, I think, at the heart of what Beneficence is about. And I would love for you to talk a bit about how the centers found you, or you found them. How did, you went from being a memoirist, or writing a memoir, let's say, to a long period of time of finding this story and living with it. And I'm just wondering where it began for you and what that process has been like.
After I wrote my memoir, Dani, from writing memoir, your writing and your life become very public. And I lived with that public life for a while and decided that I was going to write a novel. I was going to move away from that kind of exposure. And I thought, I felt confident about it. I thought, well, I'm just going to write a novel. And I spent a long time, many months, wandering around and thinking about what this story was going to be. And in a very casual, momentary conversation with a man actually who plowed my driveway, he mentioned a story from his own childhood, and it triggered a lot of thinking on my part. And I knew right then that I had my story. But I actually thought when I first pictured this story, we have this family that is they are I think a very healthy family. They are very deeply bonded to each other, and they're deeply bonded to their land on this farm. And this all takes place in the late 40s. It's a time historically that was full of hope, and it takes place in a very small Maine town. And I think the family these parents were able to create a kind of stronghold for their children, a place that was not only safe, but so generous. The land was so generous and their love was so generous that this family was able to create a sense of really profound integration among themselves and on the land. And then a very large thing happens and it challenges that. And initially, I thought that Top was going to be my primary character and that I was going to watch a man behave badly under those circumstances. He was going to act selfishly, make selfish decisions. And I was very interested in how he would understand those decisions, how he would explain them. So that is where I started. And starting a novel, I muddled around and muddled around and muddled around. And it took a long time, I would say 3 years of very little writing and a lot of thinking. And when I finally, suddenly, I felt it was as if a gate suddenly opened. It just was there for me. And I walked through, and the writing happened very rapidly then. And as the writing happened, I very quickly understood that Top was not willing to be the character that I had imagined for him, and that he, in fact, was a very, very different kind of man. And I came to love him and feel deep respect for him. And I decided that Dodie and Doris needed a voice in all of this. We needed to hear voices outside of Top's own voice. So once I arrived there, the writing really went quite quickly. It was just I had a lot to learn about writing fiction. I'm a big reader, but I thought that the move from nonfiction, which I had taught for many years, to fiction would not be as challenging as it was. I really needed to discover that kind of, I needed to let loose the storyteller and really let that writer tell the stories. And I've discovered I love telling stories. I really love telling stories. And so my characters tell stories too. Each of these 3 people tell stories over and over and over and over again. They're great storytellers.
Yeah, they are. So I have 2 questions for you regarding that. One is, do you still think of this as Top's book, or do you feel, I read it very much as a tapestry of a family, and I found myself thinking again and again, because every family member, each of the centers react differently to what happened, which we're not going to talk about because that would be a spoiler.
Yes.
But each of them, we don't know, none of us know who we're going to be if we are so tested.
Yes.
And one of the things I love about the book is that the dance in the book then becomes about the way that each member of this family is tested, So do you still think of it as Tup's book? Is my first question.
No, I don't at all. And I think that Doris and Tup both have a sense of who they believe they are. And I think that, like most of us, we have a sense of how we're going to react through our lives, how we'll respond. I think that we believe that we will bring the very best of ourselves to situations, and that we have enough wisdom to um, to make our way through in a kind of profound way any event that comes to us. And Doris and Tup find that that's not true, that what they believed their capacity was, in fact, was not true. And so this is not just Tup's story, it's Doris's story, and it's also it's Dodie's story too. Dodie is the child who reports to us what is really what the effects of these troubles that her parents are having, what the effects are. And I think that for me, each of those voices is necessary because they are all everybody is reacting in a different way and brings something different, and in fact fails in different ways too. Those failings are, I think, heartbreaking. They are genuine failings. They are not willful, they're not casual, but they are failings that have deep effect.
Yeah, there is an unbearable sadness that befalls this family, and then the reverberations of that. I mean, to go back to what you're saying, they would have felt, certainly Tup and Doris would have felt, that they would have known who they would be.
Yes.
In a crisis.
Yes.
But they were sort of buffeted or contained by this land, this farm, this life, this blessed life. And when that was torn open, they had to discover who they were each going to be in those circumstances. And it seems in a way that Dodie acts as a witness to her parents in many ways.
Yes.
To her whole family.
Yes.
So the other question I had for you about that period of time of several years where you were thinking and not writing,
mm-hmm.
and this is, I guess, a literary question or a process question, is how did that work? How did you do that? I know for me, when I'm thinking and I'm not either taking notes or finding myself like it's like I hardly even know how to do that. I find myself needing to express, needing to talk, my husband's also a writer. I talk to him. I talk to one or two writer friends. Did you have a process where you were sort of engaged with this, or were you engaged entirely with your own?
No, to say that I was thinking, I was certainly muddling. To say that it was all thought is not true. I actually, I wrote during that time. I just did not write in ways that moved me forward. Wow. It is interesting. I seem to choose to write in fairly considerable isolation. I move into my own, there's a place that I go with my writing, and it's a very, very private place. And so I don't talk about what I'm thinking and what I'm writing. I don't share it with people. And this muddling time actually produced, I would say, over 3 years, maybe 60 pages, but they weren't the same 60 pages. They just kept getting rewritten and rewritten. I would circle and circle and circle. And I initially didn't know that I was going to write in multiple voices. And what I thought I was interested in this character, in this father character, the husband, I just couldn't make it work. I couldn't actually, finally, I couldn't imagine that man, a man that is selfish and self-serving and self-justifying, I was not able to imagine him. I couldn't bring him into being. And once I finally gave myself over to that process of writing the people that I actually know and recognize, that's when things opened for me. I think that I have a very deep faith in a kind of a grace that I believe we carry, and a goodness and a desire for goodness. And once I allowed myself to write characters that I recognize, characters that I knew, we all have experienced loss. We've all experienced times of sorrow, and we also have all experienced times of finding comfort in the love that we experience. We have questioned our faith in the world and in ourselves. And once I allowed myself to write these people that I know in my heart, then things opened up. But it was, I can't tell you how many 60-page segments I wrote again and again, heading nowhere before I finally got to that point.
Yeah, I think 60 is the magic number. Yeah.
Thank you both so much for that. And thank you, Dani and Meredith as well, for that. I think that was a lovely note to end on, especially with your talk about how relatable the book is and how we've all been through those moments. And some of us are going through those moments right now with the health crisis and the various climate change world issues with tropical storms and fires. And so thank you for that. That was a wonderful display of empathy that I think a lot of us appreciated. And I think you can find that in the book, obviously, as well. So I want to open it up to questions to audience members that we have. There's a chat next to your viewing screen that you have right now, and that is going to allow you to ask questions of either Dani or Meredith about their books or their writing process. I'm sure they're both open to answering for you. And so I want to open it up by starting with, because both of you have written fiction and nonfiction, and you touched on it, and you were touching on this idea of craft. But Meredith, for this book specifically, and Dani, I'd love your input as well. What is the most challenging thing about switching between the two genres, and what is the easiest thing about switching between the two genres?
The easiest thing, I'll start there. The easiest thing is that it still is storytelling. It is just, for me, if I'm writing about my own life or I'm writing about other people's lives, I think that we understand, we share our lives and understand lives through stories. It's for me, that's a very fundamental part of the writing. The hardest part, I think, was discovering that in fiction, discovering the extraordinary, it's really an extravagant kind of freedom to make anything happen. And I discovered that initially it's pretty intimidating. And then I discovered that I absolutely loved that freedom. I could sit down each morning and anything could happen.
It's so interesting, Meredith, because it's the fact that your first book was a memoir, and that you really understood and were so accomplished at it, that memoir is storytelling. It's a shaped thing. It's not like, just splat, here's my, there's nothing about that that's interesting or universal, or that allows for the reader to connect. But I think one of the really profound differences is, as you were saying, that when you're writing fiction, there is endless possibility. There is, the world is just there in all of its layers and all of its complexity, and you can go anywhere. Whereas in memoir, you actually do know something about the parameters of the story. So you're dealing within a lane, and within that lane, lots of things can happen. And I don't think actually that memoir and fiction are both extraordinary forms, and they're just different in that way.
Yes.
So, I mean, one of the ways that I think of writing fiction is that you're stepping into a world in which a world that you're making as you step into it. And that, like when you said you ended up loving Tup, I know that feeling and I miss it because it's been a long time since I've been inside a novel. That feeling of your characters in the world that you've created being as or more real to you than the life that you're living. That's just an amazing feeling.
That's wonderful, Dani. I absolutely agree with you. I found that during the maybe 2 years that I actively wrote this novel, the centers and their farm and their home truly had more reality for me than my own life. It was, I wanted to be there. I chose to be there. And it was delicious to be able to move into those lives and share them and come to love them, but also come to feel as if I knew that farm, that I belonged there, that I knew the rhythms of the work. And it was really an extraordinary experience. I don't know if that happens with every novel. I'm suspicious that it doesn't. But Center Farm and the Center family really, I moved so profoundly inside that world that it felt pretty wonderful.
So you both have spoken so much about storytelling. And so when did you get bit by the writing bug or the storytelling bug? One of the other ways of like, when did you figure out that was your craft, the way in which you wanted to tell stories? Dani, you ventured into podcast and, there are plenty of ways to tell a story. What is it about writing and what attracts you to that medium?
Well, I could start in the sense that I love having created a podcast. I love doing it. It's the next season of Family Secrets is coming out in a couple of weeks. I'm really proud of it. But it's not what it feels like to be grappling with the page. It just isn't. It's not lesser. It's just a different form of storytelling that I've discovered and have learned a lot about and really love doing. But the feeling, from the time I was very young, I was always scribbling, like trying to make sense of my inner life and everything around me that I didn't understand. I was just, the page is where I did that, or the page both in reading and in writing. How about you, Meredith?
Yes, I'm caught by your comment about this kind of wrestling with the page. I think that one of the parts of writing that is most satisfying and most demanding is that problem solving. And I think that there's something built into the storytelling, writing, even when I was young. I loved that process of understanding that the easy story, the story that I quickly laid out on the page as a young woman, it didn't solve the problems that I didn't understand. I didn't even understand the problems. I loved telling the story, but I didn't understand that I was creating problems on the page and then that I needed to wrestle with them. And I do think solving those problems is one of the great joys of any great frustrations, but really the great joys of writing stories. And I think that for me, maturing into that moment where I understood that the problem isn't a roadblock, the problem is the work.
That is beautiful. The problem isn't a roadblock, the problem is the work. Yeah.
Give me a t-shirt or a bumper sticker. I love it.
I think that's really true.
Specifically for Meredith, about your book, you say you've spent 3 years with these 60 pages and these characters and this family. How did you not get bored from them? How did you keep it engaging for so long?
That's a great question. I actually think because of the problem solving. I think that I think that the problems were there in a very big way every day. They were really the macro problems of the project. And I was not bored. And I don't remember even being frustrated. I understood that I was diving into something every day, and that I didn't even know what I was looking for. I had no idea what I was even looking for. And so, but I don't remember being frustrated or bored by it at all. Yeah.
What a blessing. That's like a really wonderful feeling for an artist to be able to feel so invested in your work that you can continue and on with such passion for it. Someone would like to know what advice you have for young writers or for aspiring writers who want to break into, they say specifically nonfiction, but I think it can go for just writing in general. What advice you might have?
Dani, do you want to take that question?
Sure. I mean, I think one of the things I would say is ignore most advice. There's so much noise in our culture about what writers, need to do in order to break through or break in. And it's just, I still really believe that good work finds its way. And it's harder and harder to turn down the volume, shut down, social media, shut down, all of that noise telling you what you're supposed to do or what it's supposed to be, or it being about the, from the outside in and not the inside out. What is the story that you and only you have a burning need to tell? Begin there, and then go inside and close the door and stay there. And it's harder and harder when I think back when I was writing my first book, which was a novel, and it was the early 1990s. It was actually the late 1980s, and there was no internet, and there were no, I would, this is going to sound so quaint and I'm going to sound so ancient. I would take my answering machine and I would put it I would silence it. But then I realized I would still hear a click if somebody was calling me. So I put it under a pillow, on the other side of my apartment, so that I wouldn't hear anything that was going to distract or disturb or pull me away. And when you think of what it is to write today or to do anything today, everything is pulling, everything is distracting. I suffer from it too. I mean, I'm hardly sitting here, I have not solved that. But I'm aware of the struggle. And I think that's a big part of the struggle for people who are working on first projects. The first thing really is to quiet down the noise.
Yes. Yes.
Anything you would like to add, Meredith?
I think that's really wonderful. I think that part of that part of the move that we need to make is to take ourselves very seriously and our work very seriously, and not to even be thinking about readers while we're writing, not to be thinking about markets for sure. What's going to come of this? Will this go out into the world? Will it be published? But to really take the work very, very seriously. If you are an artist, then there's something to the act of daring really to take your own work that seriously.
I love that.
I love the idea of it being daring and an act of courage. I think this is a wonderful question to end our session on, and it's specifically for Meredith. What did you learn either about yourself or writing while you were working on Beneficence?
That's a great question. I think maybe the biggest thing I learned about myself and about how I love to write, what I love to write, is that I discovered that I'm interested in people that are very, very ordinarily good people. Their goodness is large and their ordinariness is large. And those are the people that catch my attention. Those are the people that I want to be inside their hearts, and I want to give them a way to be able to tell their stories. So I think that was the big thing. And I certainly discovered that I love writing fiction. I can't wait to do some more of that. So.
What a wonderful, joyful note to end on. And thank you both for your honesty, for your insight and intellect in coming into this conversation. It's been such a joy to listen to you both. So thank you so much for that. I'd love to give you both a moment to, tell people where they can find you on the internet, how they can remind them who you are. Dani, if you'll start us, and we'll end off with Meredith here.
Sure. So Dani Shapiro, my most recent book is Inheritance. And my favorite social media platform is Instagram. You can find me at Dani Writer, Dani Writer. I actually enjoy it, which is
that is something.
Why I do it.
And Meredith?
Well, I will say that I cannot yet say that I enjoy it, Dani. I'm really impressed with that, but I'm working hard at it. I have a new website at meredithhall.org. And I have just today started a Twitter account at Mayor Hall, MERHALL, books, Mayor Hall Books. So we'll see if I can report in a month or two that I too really enjoy this.
I will say Twitter is a different world than Instagram. So
yes. Try Instagram, Meredith. Try Instagram.
Yeah, try it. Let me learn this one first, and then we'll go to Instagram.
Well, I thank you so much again. And I'm McKaylee with Tattered Cover. You can find both Dani and Meredith's books at tatteredcover.com. You need to check out the latest book, I'm sorry, my learning disability is getting in the way. Beneficence.
Yes.
Thank you. Beneficence. Please purchase that at tatteredcover.com. You won't want to miss it. It's a book that is worth your time this pandemic, and we appreciate you checking that out. Ladies, if you'll stay on for just a minute while I sign off here.
Kaylee, could I add one thing to this?
Yes, please.
Yes, I wanted to mention that the publication date of my novel was pushed forward to October 6th. Yes. Because printers across the country are having a very difficult time with short staffs getting books out on time. So you can pre-order my book. Pre-order through Tattered Cover and get your order in.
Yes, and we will all still be reading this fall, and so you definitely can pre-order it now at tatteredcover.com, and we can have it on your doorstep on release day. So thank you guys again. We wish you nothing but the best. Stay safe and happy reading.
Thank you, McKaylee. Thank you, Dani.
McKaylee. Thanks, Meredith.
And we're out.